Well, hello everybody. This is Dr. Mike, and I am really excited to introduce you to this lady sitting here beside me today. This is Martha Graziano from Classical Acupuncture and Herbs here in Louisville, Kentucky. She is a renowned acupuncturist here in town, and I've had the pleasure of experiencing some of her work myself. And when I've seen changes in myself and I know that things work and I can vouch for somebody, then I am more than happy to do so. And one thing about Martha, I believe that she's different than most acupuncturists because she's very much into the science behind it, the physiology behind it. She's got a background in physiology. And so I want to introduce you to Martha Graziano from Classical Acupuncture and Herbs. Martha, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yes. Talk with me a little bit. In order to kind of put things into context a little bit, I would like to know your background with physiology and anatomy before you got into the Chinese medicine and Oriental healing. And so talk with me a little bit about your background in neurophysiology and physiology in general.
Well, you know, it was in junior high or high school. A teacher said that we humans are made of, it was like $2 or $3 worth of chemicals. And I thought, really? $2 or $3 worth of chemicals make a human that can live and dream and love and hope. And it was just mind-blowing to me. And somehow I went down the neurobiology interest. And when I was in college, I was a biology major, and I decided to go to graduate school for neuroendocrinology was just coming out. You know, they were just discovering peptides in the gut that were found in the brain, and peptides are another form of neurotransmitter. And it was just emerging, and it was just really exciting. So I came down to UK and started studying neuroendocrinology and neurophysiology. I was in a neurophysiology lab. So that was just extremely exciting.
And what were you going to do with that degree? What were you studying for?
I was going to be I wanted to be a neuroendocrinologist researcher. That was the original thought. My husband showed up, and he was from Louisville, so I moved here, and I worked in medical research both in Lexington and Louisville at the med schools. But you really couldn't make a living as a neurobiologist here in Louisville back in those days, and probably not today either. So I kind of had to retread. I worked in the med school for a while, and then I went more the private route just to afford to pay my bills, because research just doesn't pay. It's extremely exciting. Occasionally, it's a lot of going down, this don't work, this don't work, this don't work. But yeah, to make a living at research, unless you're an absolute PhD and have your own lab, it's very, very difficult to do it here in town.
Yeah, you know, I went to UK also, and I was going for biology and chemistry, and I wanted to do genetic research as well. And there came a point when I realized that, hey, this isn't for me. You know, so I got two questions. You know, if the research wasn't paying the bills, was the acupuncture going to pay the bills? And how did you get interested in acupuncture and Chinese medicine in general? Because it doesn't seem like that one is highest on the payment list a lot of times either, you know, if you're chasing that.
Well, when I was in grad school, I didn't realize everybody else in grad school was married, so their spouse put them through grad school. I didn't have that luxury, so let's just say it was pretty lean. And I would spend my spare time in the medical library. Having no money, I would just cruise the neuroscience journals, chasing all the neuroendocrinology, and I kept seeing all this research articles in front, in all these neuroscience journals of acupuncture research that acupuncture releases endorphins, and if you give people naloxone, which is what you give people for an overdose, that stops the pain relieving effects of acupuncture. And it's like, whoa, this isn't woo-woo. This is really cool stuff. And so there was something real to it. And there was just more and more research articles coming up about the neurobiology of acupuncture. I never tried acupuncture for a long time until I got nerve damage donating to the Red Cross. I used to donate blood and platelets for my father who had multiple myeloma. And then years later, at grad school, I donated a lot of blood and I had a coworker who had, she was in intensive care, internally bleeding, and she needed blood. And they discovered then I don't have cytomegalovirus. And cytomegalovirus, you don't hear about it unless you donate blood and don't have it. It affects 2/3 of Americans, and it's like getting a cold, and so what? But if you're a baby, a transplant patient, or an AIDS patient, any blood product with cytomegalovirus or CMV will kill them. So I'm a universal donor with O positive, and I didn't have the CMV, so they thought I was hot news. And they were always after my platelets. So I was donating platelets until they caused me nerve damage. Wow. And the nerve damage started gently and got worse and worse, and nothing could help, but I finally checked out. One acupuncturist didn't help, and I was pretty skeptical. But another acupuncturist I met on a business trip home, she actually helped pretty quickly, and that's kind of the style that I do. She's now retired, but it's like, yeah, this is the only thing that gave relief to it.
So you had a background in neuroendocrine physiology. And found research that described how acupuncture was able to interact with those peptides or those hormones in the neurophysiology, and that kind of opened the door. But then when you had an experience with damage that nobody else was able to help, and the acupuncture did, that was the aha moment. And I guess words just don't describe it until you see it in action. Now, one thing that's kind of confusing to me, or I see it as a barrier, is Western medicine uses certain measures and terminology to define success. And Chinese medicine uses all whole different terminologies, and I assume that there's different reasonings behind the terminologies. But there has to be some overlap, even though we're using our terminologies and they're using their terminologies. Are a lot of we talking about the same thing from a different viewpoint, or what's the biggest difference between the two?
It's a whole different paradigm. So Chinese health and Chinese medicine is about cultivating health. Okay. You know, Western medicine, we're very good at quadruple bypasses, but Chinese medicine looks at eat the right foods, prevent that quadruple bypass, you know, eat the right food, do the exercise, do the right, you know, there's different pillars of Chinese medicine, you know, you know, Western medicine is phenomenal at a lot of diagnostics and fixing emergencies. They're great at emergencies. But they really are not so great at prevention. You know, not nearly to the extent of Chinese medicine.
And so does preventing bad things from happening mean maintaining the vitality within, the ability to heal? Is that what the chi is? What do they mean when they talk about chi? Is it a vitalism from within, or how does that work?
So chi,
how would you, if you had to explain it to like a neuroscientist or an engineer of sorts, how would we explain chi?
Well, so some people look at chi as vital force and vital energy. And you can look at it as, there are people looking at the biophysics and, you know, they're looking at squid and all these like, really fancy, super high-tech machine trying to get that measurement of chi. And there's multiple things that are involved that could be involved with the transmission for acupuncture. Blood, chi is carried by the blood, is well known in Chinese medicine. And you could just equate the blood to the chi. It's carrying the oxygen and the nutrients, and then it also carries out the metabolic waste. And without good circulation, you got nothing. And the Chinese medicine wasn't evolved for you and I. It was to keep the emperor, who was considered, a god in human form. The point was to keep him alive forever. That was the point of Chinese medicine. Sorry to break it to you, folks. And they did that primarily by keeping his circulation high. Because as we get older, it's kind of like a very slow leak in a tire. You lose a couple % of circulation, and you lose a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more by 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Things just ain't, the old gray mare ain't what it used to be.
Yeah.
And that's cold feet, build up in the arteries. It's just, things are just, you're losing it at a very, very slow rate, even if somebody's relatively healthy. So keeping that circulation robust is quite a bit. There's also, as we get older, the fascia dries out, and fascia is also implicated in transmission of acupuncture and communication. And the fascia and the interstitium is just really exploding, but just the movement of that connective tissue creates a piezoelectric energy. So could that be chi too? That's a good question. We're not sure yet, but there's a lot of things going on. And the more I've been studying, the more everything's interconnected. We want the yes, this is the answer. It's clearly, emphatically A, B, or C, but usually it's some combination of many things.
Right. I can understand that. And so I have two things. One of them is you said that chi is transmitted through the blood. So you don't have to have a brain. Do you have to have a brain to have chi? Can other animals other than humans and mammals have chi?
There's usually circulation systems even in very simple creatures. I mean, there's some very interesting work with slime molds that don't have a nervous system, and they seem to be able to respond and do labyrinths and avoid noxious chemicals. So there is some ability to make sense of the environment, even in very simple. And there's circulation even within simple single cell creatures. So there's usually a membrane, usually a bilipid membrane, a fatty membrane that's semi-permeable that allows molecules and atoms to get inside, such as water, such as nutrients, such as minerals, and it also can, excrete certain things that metabolic waste that would be noxious or toxic if not excreted. So there is that communication. Do I call that communication chi? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, good question. So you also mentioned fascia and connective tissue. And I'm wondering about electrical conductivity through these meridians. Are the meridians that you were talking about the flow with the emperor, are these meridians that I hear so much about in acupuncture, are they real structures that you can put your finger on it, or is it more about the relationship between structures and how things flow up through the lines towards the brain? Does it move around? Is it more about how they communicate or relate to each other, or are they physical structures like stop signs on a road?
You can't dissect out a meridian thus far. Of course, they just finally, Neil Feast just rediscovered the interstitium, which, the osteopaths and craniosacral people knew about for 70 years, and Chinese medicine knew about for thousands of years. So the interstitium is this kind of a fluid-filled space of connective tissue through our body, and they're thinking that that's how cancer spreads in the body now, that these cancer cells get in this highway in the body, which, when they study the tissues, usually it's dried out and it would look like, just artifact. Well, it's actually a real thing.
Yeah.
So the fascia are implicated in communication with acupuncture. So there is some experiment where they injected fluorescent dye into a very famous point, pericardium 6, which helps with nausea, seasick, morning sickness. Mm-hmm. And they injected this fluorescent dye, and the dye did travel up the arm following the pericardium channel. But can you dissect it out is another question, because it might be an interstitium kind of thing. We can't dissect out meridians thus far. And there's different styles of doing acupuncture by a bunch, but there's the main highways, but there's a lot of things in between, and there's many systems of acupuncture that use, honestly, a lot of different points that other different styles. There's the World Health Organization finally tried to have a standardized main acupuncture points, and that was quite the debate. Mm-hmm. Because there's so many ways to do it, and guess what? It all works. Now, some works a little better than others, but it's not just a main highway. Although the main highways are very, very important too. But I don't think you can dissect out a meridian, at least thus far.
So we haven't been able to dissect that out. The principles of acupuncture are still there. The classical points haven't really changed very much. But almost with everything, people think that they can do it better, and they get their own ideas. Are there new styles of acupuncture coming out? Or is it kind of classically the same stuff that survived for thousands of years?
Yes to both, okay? So there's variations. Just like with music, there's so many ways to make music, even with the same instrument, okay? You go different parts of the world and they'll do wildly different things with it. There are some newer things coming out. Auricular acupuncture has some very exciting newer stuff to it. I believe the French really took off with the ear acupuncture, and there's many styles of ear acupuncture. I have 3 very good reference books, and they all work. Like the Germans have mapped out cranial nerves. So if somebody comes to me for Bell's palsy or for trigeminal neuralgia, I can target specifically that cranial nerve through the ear points. I give them body points to kind of layer the treatment and really boost it up. But so the Germans have gotten really detailed about finding different parts of the brain and different cranial nerves. Mm-hmm. There's also this is out of the French tradition, again, Nogier, but there's SAAT, Solomon Auricular Acupuncture Treatment, which is based on the Nogier school. And he's treating things like alpha-gal, which is a brand new problem. Not entirely brand new, but medical science is just starting to realize there's big. I've just seen this summer news stories and news articles like the Washington Post and on the radio about alpha-gal, which is a tick bite that can cause an allergy to red meat and dairy. And it's an unusual allergy because most allergies are to a protein, and this allergy is to a carbohydrate. So the problem with this is that it can be several hours later, and they can wake up in distress and even go into anaphylactic shock. And there have been, they theorize that a lot more people have died from it because it took a while for them to figure out what was going on. And there's no treatment for it except this SAAT, Solomon Auricular Acupuncture Treatment, does seem to be pretty darn effective for this alpha-gal problem.
And so this is actually how I met Martha, was because of another friend who had a reaction to a tick bite and had this alpha-gal sensitivity. Why do they call it alpha-gal?
It's because of the tick bite, I forget if it injects it or it just causes a sensitivity. It's this alpha galactose molecule. I can't remember the full name, but it's alpha galactose blah, 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 blah. But so everybody shortens it to alpha gal instead of saying alpha galactose, blah, 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 blah.
So because it's alpha galactose, I guess it references a sugar, which is a carbohydrate. I thought it was alpha galactase, honestly, which referenced an enzyme, but no, it's galactose. I actually had it wrong until you just mentioned that. Your research and your desire to know more about the fundamental aspects of it is a big reason why I wanted to have you on here. And so you just mentioned, I think I heard you mention briefly research on like a fresh stroke. If somebody possibly with some heart disease or something, what type of research are you seeing with acupuncture with somebody who's had a more recent stroke before it's become chronic, when they're in the initial kind of stages of it? What's it helping with?
Well, so I just wrote a research summary for our national organization, the American Society of Acupuncture. I write little synopses of research. And there's a study out of China, and the research in China is variable, but this is a highly regarded university with higher standards. And they looked at, it's a small cohort of about 60 patients, pretty much matched, in background. And they all had hemiplegia, it's spasticity, where after a stroke you can't move. And they don't have motor function, and even though they want to grab a glass, they can't. It depends on the severity of the stroke, but the muscles are too tight, and then the brain doesn't, the signaling between the body part, could be a leg, could be a hand, could be entirely one side. And what the study showed, now they did a much heavier dose than you would find in American practices for the most part. They did 5 treatments a week for 2 weeks, and they used brain imaging studies. And they found that, and they also used sham points. So sham points so they might use a real point and then move an inch over, and they were able to separate that there was point specificity, and that the sham points did not have the same result as the true acupuncture point. They found an increase in gray matter in 3 specific areas of the brain that have to do with communication, with muscle function. It gets pretty deep pretty quick, so I'll spare the brain locations. But it also 3 specific areas that were very important for stroke recovery increased in gray matter, which is increasing brain size. It also helped with something called, there's networks. So between different parts of the brain there are networks, and there's something called the default mode network. And basically it helps coordinate between different parts of the brain, and just to coordinate with, let's just say, coordination and other more complex communication between body parts and the brains. So it was very, very exciting, and it's just a small start, but it took it all the way from acupuncture treatment to brain imaging to actual, and they use standardized tests for, that yes, the muscle, the spasticity, they could do specific quantitative and qualitative measurements of the spasticity as well as the motor coordination.
I'm so surprised that they got results like that as quickly as they did when they really only saw them for 2 weeks. Now, you had mentioned a heavy treatment schedule, and the heavy treatment schedule was daily for 2 weeks, and then the treatment was done. I'm surprised that they got that good of results in only 2 weeks of treatment, because we've been taught that it takes longer for things like that to recover.
It's dosage, which dosage is harder to that's actually something I'm going to be embarking on with one of my national association. It's it's frequency, it's duration, and even within acupuncture, there's how deep do you, how long do you treat them within a session? I have longer sessions because I have 2 world-class teachers that say 45 minutes. A lot of acupuncturists are doing 20 or 25 minutes. So it's the duration, it's what you do, how long you do it. There's a lot of things that go into dosage, but and I will point out that these patients were also receiving medication and conventional medical follow-up. So there was some improvement just from recovering from the stroke without anything and recovering from the stroke with the medication. So there's some natural healing, there's some healing with the addition of medication, and this was above and beyond what the medication and was doing. So they were using, when you have a pretty severe event, you're going to throw everything at it, and they were able to parse it out, which is quite difficult to do. And they probably did a 2-week study because it's really expensive to do research, period, and especially when you get into brain imaging. That costs a lot of money to get any minutes at all on a brain imaging machine. So they had, but the fact that they could show such an improvement within a 2-week period is quite remarkable. And now would they have seen the same results maybe 3 times a week over a longer period? I would argue probably so. But the sooner you can help with a stroke, the better. When I see people with stroke, within the first 5 years, I'll make the most improvement. Although I have helped people within a 10-year period post-stroke. But the sooner we get them after the stroke, the easier it is to fix the problem.
Say that again. Well, ideally you would want them ASAP, but definitely within like the first week or 2 or 6 weeks. Is that
But within the first year, the sooner the better. When they're very acute, they may be in rehab.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can affect their bowel and bladder, and to try to get that under control is probably a little bit more comfortable for everybody. Although I've had people come see me with diapers, but the sooner the better. And there's practicalities because, the hospital's not going to say, go see the acupuncturist, see you in a few weeks. They're going to, and you want the best care, and that's kind of my philosophy, use the best care possible. And if that includes Western and Eastern and holistic approaches and dietary, I would argue that most Americans need to upgrade their diet, and that's also going to impact your inflammation and recovery.
Of course, yes. You had mentioned dosage a minute ago, and you kind of alluded to you might leave the needles in longer than other people because you had 2 world-class people that taught you. A lot of times in America here, we want to get in and out just as quick as possible and be on our way so we could go do other stuff. And you also had mentioned something about somebody leaving the needles in for 20 minutes. And so are there different thoughts as to how long you leave them in, and why do you leave them in longer?
Giving longer stimulation to the brain would be mostly, the true answer is because I was told to.
Good.
And the second reason is you're giving longer stimulation to the brain. And even within that, some of the needle techniques are just pop them in. Sometimes you look for something called da chi, this dull, achy feeling.
Okay.
And you might wiggle the needle around, stimulating it. And that's recruiting the fascial system for additional oomph. And there's, they've mapped out the neurobiology of a lot of acupuncture where they mapped out to the spinal cord and the ventral, whatever roots of the spinal cord and specific areas of the brain. I'm working with with the Society of Acupuncture Research. There's a group of scientists in Irvine, California, with the University of California, and they can do very specific points, and they can map out the very specific parts of the brain that it affects, and they can map out the neurotransmitters involved, so it can get very, very specific. But there's multiple routes. There's a thing with acupuncture. It just helps the body run better. There's something called homeostasis, which helps bring it back to a happy medium. So acupuncture, if something's in excess, acupuncture can bring it down. If something's deficient, it can bring it back. And a lot of these, not all the time, but sometimes what brings it down is one neural pathway, and what brings it up is a different neural pathway. But nonetheless, it helps bring the body back to more optimal functioning.
And I guess that's why it's hard to do research and have a true placebo, because the needles can act on spots many different ways by many different pathways. So even when you put a placebo like you were talking about on the side of the wrist, it's still activating other things, even though it's not classically on the point you're after. It's still corresponding to something.
Right, there's a physiological response to sham needles, and sham, you know, the research likes the gold standard of double blind. Well, it's hard to blind it from a patient. Are they getting stabbed with a needle or not? And by the way, our needles are about much tinier. You could put 20 to 25 of our needles inside a regular doctor syringe. But nonetheless, most people can tell that they have received a needle. And our needles are much less big a deal. Wouldn't you agree that?
You can tie them in a knot, and they're more like a stiff piece of fishing line.
Human hair.
Yeah, something like that.
Fishing line is much thicker than my needles, from my experience.
Either way, they're pretty thin. They don't have a hole in them.
Yeah, they're yeah, but yeah, it's the sham research has held back a lot of it doesn't show when you do sham needles. A lot of times it doesn't show as big a difference between acupuncture and no treatment at all, because the sham needles are doing something, and whether it's recruiting the fascial network or a different neural network, something's happening. Now, usually the acupuncture is far better than the sham, but it makes it a lot more muddy.
Well, your depth of knowledge is off the chain, and you don't have to justify that anymore. So this is a two-part question. What areas of research really have the strongest evidence right now, and what do people like dealing with the things that they're good at? And so what are the things that you like seeing on a regular basis? What's the research strong on, and what are your skills strong on?
Well, the research is extremely strong on pain relief. So it can help with acute pain, it can help with chronic pain. That is like kind of what launched acupuncture into more of the Western world. The acupuncture releases endorphins and enkephalins, which is our own natural pain reliever. It is very good it helps with fertility, although fertility gets pretty complicated very quickly. It helps with a lot of headaches and back pain and migraines and a lot of chronic pain. I work with the VA, and there's a lot of vets with just excruciating pain, and some vets can get quite a bit of relief. And there's some vets, I think it has to do with scar tissue. When there's tons and tons of scar tissue, it's just making it harder for everything to transmit. Because some of these people have been sent through a meat grinder, God bless them. But we do help with anxiety, we help with stress. I mean, we help with PTSD. We help with, there's many things that we can help with. And often I will send people to another professional. If they're not responding, if they're coming to me for sciatica, I see a ton of sciatica. And if they're not responding as fast as I want them to, I'll say, go see a chiropractor, or you might need to see another specialist. But it's very good with neurological. I mean, it helped me with my nerve pain. It helps with Bell's palsy. It helps with trigeminal neuralgia. It helps with stroke. You know, depending on the level of the stroke. So something in the brainstem is tougher than some of the other parts of the brain. So, because some parts of the brain are just more fundamental. But we do help with balance for a lot of folks. We help with neuropathy. The neuropathy is a booger. And, you know, there's certain things that we are much stronger at. Neuropathy, I'd say maybe a 60% chance of improvement. Same with tinnitus. But a lot, there's not much that Western medicine can do for a lot of neuropathy or tinnitus. So a 60% chance is better than none at all. With pain, it's more like, I tell my clients 75 to 85% of people improve, and you'll know within a visit or two if I'm going to help you. Mm-hmm. And like stroke and neurological recovery can take a little bit longer. We can help with post-viral and long COVID. We can help, that takes a little bit more because we're more working internally with the body. Mm-hmm. But that seems to work very, very well. It does help with many folks with shingles as well, and even gait issues. I've just had this year a couple of folks with gait issues, and it was like, whoa, just with needles in my office, they were walking, 60% better than when they came in. It was still needed some more work, but it's like, oh my gosh, that's pretty astounding. It's also remarkably good at vagus nerve regulation. So there's a lot of autonomic nervous system disorders. POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia. There's sometimes the autonomic nervous, the fight or flight system can just cause all kinds of very distressing things. And acupuncture does help the majority of these people, mostly by helping communicate beautifully with the vagus nerve and help regulate and calm that down.
The vagus nerve has been in the news for a while. I suspect it will be more in the news in the future. How would somebody know if they have vagus nerve problems?
A lot of these people are stuck in fight or flight.
Okay.
A lot of people. So there's a spectrum. Just like with any dis-ease, it can be mild to severe. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it can be folded into other problems. I've had people with post-COVID, and they would have weird shakes, and it was their autonomic nervous system had problems because of post-COVID or post-viral. Mm-hmm. So sometimes there can be multiple things but sometimes they can't sit still. Sometimes it's straight up anxiety. Sometimes people come to me and it's like they can't stop talking. It's like they want to tell you everything all at once so they don't forget, and they are just kind of hyper a little bit.
Yes.
And that's a sign, and sometimes it's just temporary, and sometimes it's a way of being. And if it's a way of being, you're not sleeping as well, you're not resting as well. We can't be on all the time. We have to. We need that rest, and we need that good solid sleep.
If somebody came to you and they had what they described as post-COVID, which could really mean a lot of different things. It could mean lung stuff. It could mean a persistent cough. It could mean I've lost my sense of smell. I have fatigue. I'm not sleeping. Wow. How does your brain process where to start on somebody who may have a diagnosis that may have nothing to do with what the underlying condition is, and it may have a wide variety of symptoms associated with a diagnosis that has nothing to do with what the underlying problem is? Where do you start in something like that?
So, well, I look at the patient. I do an intake of all of their body systems, not just I can't sleep, or I'm always pooped, I can't even walk across the room without taking a rest. So I talk to the patient, I take their pulse, I look at them and see what's important to them, and how is it affecting the quality of their life. They can't go on walks with their dog or their spouse or their kids. I look at just kind of their vitality as well. But a lot of the post-viral stuff, post-viral can be very complex, post-COVID. Just like Gulf War syndrome, there can be a whole different set of symptoms, and not a one of them match everybody else. Mm-hmm. They'll share clusters of symptoms with other people, but the underlying cause is more inflammation. It can also be your stress hormone. When you're not feeling well, your stress hormone's way high. And that stress hormone can impact so many things. It can mess with your sleep, it can mess with your fertility, it can mess with so many things. And that cortisol being so high can truly chemically, physically, and emotionally really impact you. So, and sometimes we just have to start somewhere. And fortunately, with what I've come up with, it seems to help everything work better. And we tweak it, we tweak it as needed. Because sometimes, my starting point will work on the vast majority of people, and sometimes I'm not happy with the results and I have to tweak it and add more points or, fine tune it to the person. So.
Yeah, and I saw that with my own treatments. Let's just say it was for cold feet and temperature dysregulation problems. And the first couple treatments, you asked me if it helped, and I said no. I'm still cold. And then after a couple of treatments, it wasn't helping. So you modified what you were doing, and I believe you added a second thing. And a couple of treatments, it still wasn't helping. And so you added the 4 horsemen, and whatever that 4 horsemen was, you said, let's put the 4 horsemen on them. Something will happen. And that night, I didn't need socks to sleep because my feet weren't cold. But there was where you started was not where you ended up, and you had to find things that didn't work before you found the thing that did work. And it totally makes sense that what works for one person might not work for everybody, but you've got to be able to give time to work with it and find a different angle on it. And eventually I was feeling better, and it was in the middle of summer, and I just wasn't that cold, anymore. So my objective that I came in for, was satisfied. I have 2 more questions, and then we'll kind of wrap it up some. One, do people have to be sick to come see you, or can people come see you just for wellness? Like, I stopped when my objective was better, but do people come just for wellness?
Absolutely. I will argue that everybody's under stress. It's the world we live in, and the flavors of stress change throughout time. But in ancient Greek and ancient Rome, they had stress too. It might have been a different flavor, but there's always stress, and that's just part of our lives. And at the very least, it's good for stress. At the very least, it helps people maintain their health. So some people, like even with fibromyalgia, sometimes in the beginning we need to kind of get them to a higher level. And I have people that come see me once a month, every 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, as their individual needs are. And they can tell when they stretch it out too long, they can tell that they're just not feeling as good. So we just help optimize everything. You don't have to wait for a major cataclysm to come in. And most people do wait till there's a problem to fix. You don't call a plumber really to check your pipes, but if I call a plumber, it's like, hey, can you check this and check that, and it can help a lot of people.
Right. If doing this makes you feel better, don't be in such a rush to stop doing what makes you feel better. There's another question I wish I had asked before that one. And we didn't talk about it. And there's a group of people that are really looking for help. And I think you can help them. And we've talked about this before. And the question is, acupuncture might have a different way of looking at things like cancer. And it may have a different approach for helping people. Especially, I know they deal with a lot of pain and they deal with a lot of fatigue. Can acupuncture do for people that are dealing with cancer or post-cancer in terms of helping them get their quality of life back and treating what they have? Can people with cancer be seen by acupuncture? Because sometimes people don't even want to see them.
Absolutely. So, yes, I help a lot of people going through cancer treatments. I will say, we will never say we can treat cancer just with acupuncture alone. I'll never, ever say that. But we can support you through other processes. And there's actually a colleague, Dr. Sonia Milani, that's she's a naturopathic doctor specialized in oncology. So she can help kind of bridge between treatment and more holistic viewpoints. So, she is somebody that I would call if anybody in my family ever had a problem with cancer. But yes, we can support the nausea, we can support the energy, we can support the overall vitality, if you will. There's quite a bit of research out there, and major big cancer hospitals such as Sloan Kettering Memorial and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute all have acupuncture. And they all send people to the Society of Acupuncture Research. So it's a thing. It's very, very helpful for cancer patients.
Gosh, one more question. I could just talk to you all day. Is there any research on acupuncture and some type of mitochondrial function, increasing output, or just in the realm of mitochondria energy production?
That's a great question. I don't know. I do know that acupuncture helps with energy. So I will have to stick my finger and see, have they traced it to mitochondrial levels? I'm not going to make anything up, but it wouldn't surprise me. I'm not aware of it, but the field of science is so, it's like, with this project I'm working on for the Society of Acupuncture Research, it's on acupuncture, cardiovascular health, the microbiome, and inflammation, because inflammation is a big part of everything. And it was like 3 huge galaxies or 3 universes. And I mean, it's vast, the amount of research in cardiovascular health. Well, okay, let's narrow it down to more blood pressure regulation. Okay, that reduces it to a small, to a galaxy instead of a universe. But there's so much in each one. There's no one person that can know everything. We can go look it up. Thank God there's a lot more information retrieval available to us. But just, and what I've been finding out is that there's so much interaction between systems. It's not just the gut-brain axis with going back to the neuropeptides that got me into science, but there's a gut-heart-brain axis, and it wouldn't surprise me if there was, everything is intertwined. How can it not be? We study it scientifically by simplifying it. Okay, we're just going to look at this, and one of the, it's a double-edged sword with Western medicine. They're looking at just your heart. Well, they're great at looking at just the heart, but so many things impact the heart health that they just kind of, your kidneys, you got to go talk to the kidney dude or dudette, and with holistic, we look at the whole thing. But the more I'm learning, the more it's all connected, and some more important inputs than others, without a doubt.
So let's talk about your office. You had mentioned working with the veterans. I know you have a soft spot in your heart for veterans and the VA. Are you actively looking to work with more veterans and the VA?
I'm open to that. I work with the VA and community care, and then we have twice a month a free veterans and first responder clinic at the Highland Community Ministries. It's we're on Facebook with having zero budget and all volunteer. It's the Louisville Acupuncture Project. But the first and third Wednesday of the month from 6 to 7, it's more of a community-style acupuncture, and it's by donation if you choose. And that's available to any veteran or actively serving first responder, including police, firemen, paramedics, people who take the 911 calls, and their immediate family. Because if somebody has PTSD, it affects the whole family.
Yeah, this is a really big deal, and I don't think enough people really think about it and take you guys up on that. But it's by donation, and it's for all those people that are helping our communities too. And that's a tough group that, in my experience, the policemen and the firefighters and stuff, they like to hold stuff inside. And, just taking care of that group in general is a very necessary thing, because they're the ones that are running out of buildings with people on them and fires and, I think that there's possibly a certain stigma with that class of people about holding it all inside and not taking better care of themselves.
Well, it was stigmatized. I mean, just My sister has a nephew that was sent to Iraq and had a bad case of PTSD. And I mean, the way they treated this young man was just absolute. It's still stigmatized in the military. They're getting better at it. The VA is getting better at addressing it, but it's still quite a stigma to say you have PTSD. And how we'll bring people in is, hey, would you like to sleep better, have better energy, have less pain? And that's how we get them in. And a lot of them say, yeah, I have some PTSD, or not, but a lot of them do. I mean, how can they do what they do and not have a little PTSD?
Yeah, it sounds like current traumatic stress disorder too.
Well, and even I was working with a police person, and she said, in Iraq or in Afghanistan or wherever, you do your tour and you can come home. She witnessed one of her partners being murdered on duty, and she goes, I have to go on patrol at that corner every day. So she's continually re-triggered by that PTSD.
Right. If you can't sleep, you can't forget, and so just going through the sleep avenue helps them be able to, reconcile those memories. And it's a very valuable service. So veterans, police, firefighters, first responders, their family. Say it again. The second and fourth
It's
Wednesday?
the first and third Wednesday of the month. Find us on Facebook at the Louisville Acupuncture Project.
And where can people find you to contact you for their acupuncture needs?
My clinic is on Lower Brownsboro Road at 1999 Brownsboro Road in the Clifton neighborhood. I'm also I have a webpage, classicalacupunctureherbs.com. You can call me at 502-489-1068. I'm also the main contact for the free veterans and first responders clinic. So if you're looking, I'll be found.
Gotcha. You're doing great work. Is there anything at the end? For somebody who just feels just hopeless and exhausted, and they've tried everything, what would you want them to understand about your body's ability to recover?
Oh, wow. There's so much opportunity to upgrade your life. And I tell most of my clients, you should start feeling better within the first few visits. Now, if something's really complex, like long COVID or post-viral or certain things that are much more complicated, or fibromyalgia, give me at least 6 or 7 visits. You may not be completely done, but you should notice that you are significantly better than when we started.
So that's like a minimum, but what's a higher end? Like what, I may see you this many times. Can you just give them an idea?
It depends on the severity. It depends on the person. Somebody older with a lot of multiple diseases going on is going to take longer to fix. Like young people, I can do treatments on young people and they get better so much faster. And I think it's a circulatory system. Like a 14-year-old, you can just fix them in just a handful of visits, where somebody in their 70s or 80s is going to, and somebody past 80 often, depends on their activity level, but often when people hit 80, it takes a lot more to see results. And again, I think it's tied to the circulatory system.
Makes sense. You said it was in the blood. So if you're seeing Martha, you should expect results.
Well, or you'll know soon enough.
You'll know soon enough. That's great. Thanks for taking the time out here to be with us, Martha. And if you guys are having any problems and you'd like to try some acupuncture from somebody reputable, there she is, Martha Graziano, Classical Acupuncture and Herbs.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thanks.